That's right. Today we're going to talk about Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, that's right, Callie Hart's Quicksilver, a book that I normally would not read. And I was not planning to read. I read this specifically. It was a prompt for the last readathon that we did, and my wife picked this out because she really likes this book. And I knew that this wasn't going to be for me, but I also kind of expected to hate it, and I didn't hate it, although it definitely still wasn't for me. And I wasn't sure if I was going to review it or not, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to just talk about this as something that's pretty out of the norm of what I normally read, and well, so we're gonna do that. So Quicksilver is it's billed as like a romantasy one, and it is definitely felt like to me that this was pretty prototypical YA fantasy, but with the more smutty side of romance kind of thrown in. So it's that sort of divide, and I commented when I did my wrap up. That's where ultimately I knew pretty quickly this wasn't going to be for me because I don't really care for the smutty type of stuff in my books, and also I don't tend to care too much for YA type of fantasy. But at the same time, it's pretty well done, and it does set up some interesting ideas and an interesting world, and do some things there. So this isn't one where it's just all about that. There is a plot, there is a world, there is a story, there are these things going on, and so I think it did a pretty decent job with the actual narrative and with the world. And so that's where I didn't hate it like I expected to. It was mostly because of that, because there actually was stuff going on. But the kind of the base premise is you have the main character, Saris, who is in this world, or in like this city that's very striated based on class, and she's part of the really low class area where they barely get any water, and it's sort of very YA setup where it's divided, and they're struggling, and she's a thief, and ends up getting caught up in a bigger thing because she steals something she shouldn't. And but then of course though she secretly has magical powers, and then ends up opening up a portal into the world of the Fae. And then most of our story is taking place in that world of the Fae. And naturally, of course, that's where she meets Quicksilver, and we establish our sort of, I think, enemies to lover type of romance is what you call this one here. And so that's kind of our setup. So pretty YA premise. Throughout, you do get though some lore on the world, and we find out that the Fae in this world are looked at as being almost kind of mythical, and not nobody really believes they exist for the most part, besides like in old stories. But the that land is ruled by a seemingly undying queen, who has some big powers and everything, and is the one controlling things, and apparently is well aware of the Fae, and like convinced that they're going to come back and try to depose her. So there's sort of the tension set up there, and the idea that a portal has been opened up between worlds, which is something that's not been able to happen for a long time due to kind of story stuff. And I'm not going to get in deep or do spoilers or anything, but that's why that's a big deal with magic being available there. This story, I do feel like it focuses more so on the relationship between the two, as well as what the character Quicksilver, what his goals are going to be as well. So we're not dealing a ton between like the two worlds. I imagine there probably is going to be more of that that's relevant later on in the series, but it's doing more so a story in the other place, and that's just our kicking off point. It does institute some like interesting ideas of the immortal fae, and also there's some creatures that are sort of like vampires. You have sprites and other types of things, and there's a lot of actual culture that's set up, and the author does a pretty good job there of having the culture shock be there, and it's not where like constantly you're being explained to of like, oh, this is bad because it's this, but you see people react, and it doesn't even always explain exactly what happened, but you see people react to like, oh, this isn't how this is done, or this is super offensive here, or this doesn't make sense. And so I thought those parts were, again, well done overall. Now, of course, though, I do have to talk about the whole idea of the enemies to lovers thing, which not something that I'm a fan of in general. And again, I don't really read the romance books or romantasy, and especially I don't really care for a lot of heavy sexual content in my books. So I knew I wasn't going to enjoy those parts. And there's definitely some of that. It is not constant, but once you kind of start with it, there is quite a lot of it throughout. and so definitely should expect that. However, this is another one of those things where this doesn't go nearly as bad as some of the things I've heard, like in the dark romance books and the one I read too, which was so much worse with it. But the the whole base setup and the relationship between the two characters, I don't find super believable because they're super antagonistic toward each other, especially the character of Quicksilver, who's extremely antagonistic in lots of like not cool ways. But the other thing as well too, and there's a this is a minor spoiler, I think. Although I think if you've heard about the book, you've probably heard about this aspect. But I'll timestamp if you want to skip past this. But this is, I think, the part that makes it the most problematic for me. Um, in the book, the character Quicksilver gets Ceres to swear a blood oath to obey him, basically, and she doesn't really realize the extent of that and what it is, and that it actually will compel her to obey. And from that point on, although it's never like outright said that it's used in any way, but from that point on, I'm like, there's no world where consent can exist at that point when one person has the ability to compel the other. And it's stated multiple times that she doesn't even always realize when she's being compelled. So I'm just like, sorry, for me, that relationship is never going to be okay with that being in there as well too. And it's I'm sure people would see it differently than that, but immediately I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. When this is happening here, it's just the immediately nopes me out of that situation. And there's not, and it's used later to be like, oh, you know, it wouldn't be done. But again, I'm just like, nah, I find that really problematic, big time. And it's not nearly as bad as some other things I know that are out there. And especially in the I'm sure the like the dark romance TikTok kind of people. But yeah, that was the thing there for me. So back to non spoiler. But so with that, again, not really my thing. I think it's something though where if you are if you're somebody too, and I mentioned I do feel this is very YA plus the smut thing, which I think is somewhat popular with the romantasy types of things. And I don't mean that to be a negative thing or anything, but it's just YA tends to, and one of the reasons I'm just not a fan, tends to use a lot of familiar elements and things you've seen before and have a kind of simpler story so that it's just, you don't have to dig in deeper. And I like the more really epic, digging in a ton, the world building, the lore, and those types of things. I like a lot more in depth and I like unique elements, and you get less of that here. And so I think this branches well with it. Very much the author is using familiar elements, things you've seen before, so that they don't have to explain to you what this or that is, and you just kind of you figure it out, and you're able to be seated within the story and know what's going on very quickly. But then does add some of her own lore and items in there in the world building, like the history. And so I did still find some of that stuff to be interesting. Now, granted, I have no desire to continue. This was not a book that was for me, and is never going to be a book that's for me. It's just not to my taste. But again, I expected to hate this, so when I came out around like middling on it, I was pretty surprised with that. And it's one of those things too, where I understand why this is very popular, because even I didn't hate it. And this is like you again, not for me in either side of the coin, but it's well written. It has you know, the YA kind of storytelling where it's very easy to follow, and the people, of course, who like, you know, the more spicy romancy type elements. It has plenty of that. So sometimes I'll read like the book that's really popular, and I'm like, I don't understand why this is popular. I totally get why this is popular. Makes absolute sense to me. I can see it. Still not for me, but I totally understand why this is one that's enjoyed. And so if you are wanting to try something in that vein, if you're like me and it's totally not your thing, maybe this isn't too bad of a one to try, because of the fact that it has actually, you know, it's not terrible or just only about that. There is story, there is some lore and some world building, some other things going on as well. But I'd be curious, anybody, I'm sure there's at least some overlap. So if you have read the book, let me know if you agree, disagree with my thoughts there too. Again, this was super different for me, but I know there's a wide variety of you that in the audience there, and maybe watching this because you're curious to see what my thoughts were on it. But that's kind of where you have it there. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on anything there as well. I would love to hear from you. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.